reading ours was magically solved. I sent you
Well, they were confused. They said they were up before.
that was Henderson.
No. We had a big discussion about this. They said, no, they were up. That email that you pulled up from August
Was it really?
was May 23rd. He sent it to you May 23rd, and then you replied.
Okay, sit. Wendy, we're starting. Wendy, we're starting. Everybody but me. Jesus Christ. Where'd Michael go? Yikes.
Michael. Mike.
Okay, if
7 o'clock right now.
we're starting. Okay, if I could sit. Jesus Christ. If I could call the meeting to order, please. It's not the audience that we're worried about. Council, okay. Go sit.
You've already approved the money. Did you do the parking lot?
No, I'm sorry. I should have asked you earlier. Thanks.
Council, it is 1 minute after 7. We are in council chambers, Tuesday, June the 26th, on a gorgeous summer day. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda as has been amended? Pardon? Amended? No. Yes. Yes. It's amended. Thank you, Councillor Humphrey. Second, please. Councillor Tom. Comments or questions? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. May I please have declarations of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none, we have no community presentations tonight. We have 2 delegations, please. First up, Mr. Greg Smith, with respect to R1 Library Square, and then Garth Brown. Mr. Smith, come to the podium. If you could introduce yourself, please. And you have 5 minutes, sir. There will be a warning chime at 4.
Good evening, Council. My name is Greg Smith. I live at 74 Ardell Crescent in Aurora. I want to apologize for not being able to delegate last week. I hurt my back dancing at work. The pole broke. I'm here tonight delegating as a resident. As many of you know, I volunteer as Vice Chair of the Library Board, Vice President of Music Aurora, the organization that has produced the Aurora Winter Blues Festival for the last 7 years. First of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for your dedication and commitment to the town. I know the work that you do is thankless at times, and as we get near the end of the term, I wish you all the best in whatever future endeavors that you're going to be doing. I also like to thank the United Church for coming out to hear me speak. I think that's really great to have their support. To start with, I'm in 100% agreement that it's time to redevelop Library Square. I'd love to see a gathering place sizable enough to host events. My concern is more about the process than the outcomes. I believe that by improving the process, we end up with better outcomes. Getting it right, in my opinion, is better than just getting it done. We have to ask ourselves questions. You know, we have all these volunteers that we recognize here with town awards. They're volunteering on committees, boards, user groups. We recognize them every year, but when it comes to giving proper notice of things coming before council, I think sometimes we fail in that area. And so I think that showing some respect and courtesy for those that volunteer their time would be rightly afforded and should be. I don't think it's right that myself as a library board member should find out about Library Square coming to before council by reading a councillor's Facebook post. The library group was the only one, to my knowledge, that had paid for a facilities needs assessment and was presented to this council in 2015. When I look at outcomes, Does this design provide for the needs of the library as expressed? Is there a plan in place for community space and culture needs? Do we have a cultural plan like the sports plan? I believe that recently talk about additional sports fields was discussed here at Council. I believe that there's a sports plan from PRAC in January, I believe it was 2016. Is there such a plan for building more community space in our community? Assuming that we have a cultural and community needs assessment plan completed, do we have a business plan for the new square? What will it cost to run operationally? Who's going to run it? How will it impact on the cultural center and library programming models? For instance, the library is closed on Sundays in the summer currently. Should the library be open when program events are taking place in the square? What does this costing look like? How about this new building? Do we have a business plan, operational plan, and costing? It's great to say the corporation needs more space, but should this space compete with existing companies, organizations such as dance studios, music organizations, and theater groups? If it is to be collaborative, how can this space be utilized working together to reduce operating costs? To me, we're putting kind of the cart before the horse. Going to design before we even know what specifically is going in the building, how it's going to work, who's going to manage it, and so on, is really important. Do we need theater space? With Music Aurora, we have permitted Town Park, Band Shell, Armory, Cultural Center, Library, Town Hall. Not many spots we haven't used over the year. I think it would be prudent to speak to all the user groups in this space. I know we have not been approached. My time's limited, but I think that adding the parking spots up top, supporting the cultural center and the library in the immediate future is a wise route in my opinion. We've all complained about parking in the area for many years, and I think in the immediate term that solves a lot of issues for both the library and the cultural center. On a personal level, my recent back injury prevented me from attending last week's GC meeting, but also the library board meeting. I don't have a handicap parking spot or pass, so mobility and accessibility were a concern.
If you could wrap up, please, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I think accessibility, is a very important thing when looking at the library square, and I would appreciate you having concern for the 300,000 plus visitors that attend the library on an annual basis.
Thank you very much. May I first have a motion to receive Mr. Smith's delegation? Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Second, please, Councillor Thompson. Any comments or questions for our delegate? Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you so much, Greg, for coming this evening and articulating your thoughts and concerns. We hear them loud and clear. I heard them loud and clear before tonight, and I hope your back injury is doing better. Stop that pole dancing, would you? You know what? We can always improve. I think there's always room for improvement from a communication perspective and an engagement perspective. I know that it was last minute. I know that the library did get an opportunity just before the meeting last week, but you know what? It's another lesson learned. I do believe, and I have faith in the process, that there's still lots of opportunity to look at this design and listen to those concerns of the library board and other residents, and in particular accessibility. I think it's very critical, absolutely. The needs assessment done by the library, I think those are absolutely valuable because the programming space in these buildings have not been finalized. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here to partner with the library board and other committees and boards. So I'm looking forward to that process coming forward, and I believe your articulation of the issues helps us in terms of what we need to look forward to make this successful. So thank you again for coming out tonight, and take care of your back.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Gartner.
Thank you for coming, Greg. This is obviously important to you. From what I can understand, you're speaking of not being consulted with respect to the Winter Blues Festival?
Yeah, we had no communication with anybody from Music Aurora with regard to any of the library square.
Thank you. My understanding was that there was going to be quite a wide consultation before this came forward again. And you spoke about accessible parking. Have you looked at the plan, I'm sure. Can you see anywhere where we might be able to include more accessible parking for the library? Or it's...
Well, I guess accessibility is, from my perspective, isn't just those people that have a permit to be able to park in accessible parking spots. We, at the library and the cultural center, we have a lot of senior people. We have a lot of young families, mothers with their young kids. They go to the library, as an example. You load up with books for your 3 or 4 kids. It's a lot of weight and things to lug around, and I think ease of accessibility to the library and the cultural center is very important. I have one of the volunteers on the Aurora Winter Blues Festival. She takes painting lessons at the cultural center, and her concern about, because of back issues and so on, is lugging her easels and art supplies and all that from a greater distance to attend those classes.
Thank you. And you weren't here last week, but I share quite a lot of your concerns. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Greg, for delegating on behalf of the citizen. In our report on page 3, there are revisions that have been made regarding drop-off that you were talking about, the accessible drop-off. So that would be the turnaround we were talking specifically about.
Right.
And that has been relocated further east of what is now a very busy drop-off. Could you comment, please, on sort of what sort of volume, from your perspective, you see at that location?
Well, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the library board, but just personally, one of my big concerns still is we had talked about with some of the councillors that in particular that were on the library board. I know that the Highland Gate Park had like a 3D fly-through and so on, and part of my concern was the elevation change from that upper back parking lot as proposed, getting down to the entrance of the library. And where that turnaround is pushed east, is it a totally flat area to be able to get in and out of vehicles with whatever that you need to, strollers, whatever has to be done? And so that's part of my concern. And then also, the opportunity to get out of the elements. And I know on the accessibility side of it, it's a concern for people with powered wheelchairs and things like that, being caught out in the elements with rain and so on.
But you, it says here that the Aurora Public Library and staff understand the revised plan is now acceptable. So apart from you have to live with going to and from the elements, it was preferred to be closer and out of the elements than the situation is now.
My understanding is it was expressed very clearly from our board within in our discussions that having parking accessible to the library was the preferred option, and maintaining parking close to the library what has always been the preferred option and hasn't really changed. Being that council has gone down a particular direction in terms of design and so on, I think that the library board, the CEO and the board chair in particular, have tried to work with staff to make the best of a situation.
Thank you.
Seeing no other comments or questions? Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just point out that to assert the feelings of the board, I don't think is fair to the board. You've indicated that you are representing yourself this evening. The board itself is in favor of this, so to say that they're only in favor of it for certain reasons, I think that's purely speculation.
Okay.
Speaking on as a board member, the board is in favor of this. That's why we're here tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Seeing no other comments, all in favor of receipt of dismissed delegation, refer to the item. Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you, sir. I hope your back's better soon. Our next delegate is Mr. Garth Brown with respect to traffic calming measures. Welcome, sir. You have, if you could introduce yourself, you have 5 minutes and there's a warning chime at 4.
Thank you and good evening. My name is Hogarth Brown. I live on 23 Patterson Drive. The purpose of this visit, and it's going to be shared with some of my fellow residents. We've had this issue with cars that are driving at an increased pace on our street. And as I mentioned, we will use this opportunity, myself and 2 other residents, to discuss why we think that this street in particular needs to have either traffic calming measures of some sort or speed bumps. In 2004, there was this little girl who walked from the library and asked her mom to please let her walk on her own, 6 years of age. The mom reluctantly said, sure, why not? A minute later, she was hit by a minivan. She was rushed to the hospital and succumbed to her injuries. It gained national attention in Canada. And the only reason it did is because the girl, her name was Georgia Walsh. Her father, John Walsh. He, at the time, and probably still is, the president of the Conservative Party of Canada. The Prime Minister then, and as I said, it only gained national attention because of this. What I and our fellow residents do not want is a death to occur on Patterson Drive for someone to listen to our concerns. I'll have one of my fellow residents take over. Frank.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Francesco Panisi. I live at 27 Patterson Drive. I'm Garth's next door neighbor. I've had the privilege to call Aurora home for 4 years now, specifically on Patterson Drive. And I live there with my wife and my 2 small sons who are aged 2.5 and 6 months old. I also work as a paramedic for York Region Paramedic Services, but I'm not here to talk to you about any of my calls that I've done in my past or my career, or to inundate you with analytics or statistics. All I can say is that if you were to ask any of my 500 plus colleagues whether they would accept traffic calming measures, I certainly think 100% of them would welcome it with open arms. Patterson Drive is a throughway street for motorists to avoid the Bayview and St. John area. So not only are we dealing with the speed factor, we're also dealing with more vehicles on our road. It's no secret that there's been a lot of development in the area, both commercial and residential. The population density has increased in the 4 short years that I've lived there. And I don't think it's unreasonable to ask council for traffic calming measures to reduce the average speed on Patterson Drive. And I hope that council sees fit with this motion, and we can do something about it before someone is injured or killed. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Michael Hudson. I live at 26. I'm right across the street from both Hogarth and Frank. I'm here to speak a little bit about my personal experiences. I run a small business from my home. I'm in the neighborhood very often through the day, which some of my neighbors are not. I consistently see people using our neighborhood.
1 minute, sir.
Using our neighborhood as a bypass to get around lights, to get through the neighborhood as quick as possible. It's true that both residents of Bayview Greens and the rest of Aurora do speed too much down our street, but the increased traffic flow is creating a real problem through the day as well. It's not just the 5:30 to 7 o'clock rush at night, it's all through the day. So I would appreciate consideration for the actual calming measures, similar to what's on McMaster, which is not far from our street. I think they work fabulous, and we would welcome them.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
May I first have a motion to receive and refer the item? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Humphreys, thank you. Any comments or questions for the delegates at all? Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to thank you very much for coming forward. There is a process. Obviously, we do what we call warrants, which is measurements and volume. If it doesn't meet the very basic one of volume, then it's not considered. But I would consider moving forward for you. So, have you gone to get like an 85% with all the residents in the area? Because that's one of the parts of the process as well.
This is how the process was started. I took a clipboard and I walked to every house and I got 80%. I contacted Anchor, I can't remember her last name now. Then she in turn gave me the name of someone else, Michael Batt, who in turn had been emailing back and forth. I'm not going to go through all the emails. Probably got about 57 to 60. I was not getting anywhere with it, and then I contacted our councillor, Michael Thompson, who I have to admit responded. It's easy to say, I guess what I'm really trying to get at is the best way to understand the issues that the electorate is going through is actually walk into the shoes. And for us as residents, we see it. In the last 5 years, as Michael has articulated, the traffic has increased twofold. When I look at McMaster as an example, McMaster is probably 300 to 500 meters at best, yet they have traffic calming measures, speed bumps. It behooves me to understand why it's so difficult to get the very same thing on Pedersen Drive that is 3 times the length, and it's far more dangerous and far more cars coming from Bayview all the way down through the roundabout. That's difficult for me to comprehend.
Well, Mr. Brown, I was the councillor that introduced those speed bumps, and I would be in full support of moving forward with you.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you for being here, as well as for your fellow residents. Just with regards to the comment that people are using it as a flow through to bypass the intersection in St. John's and Bayview. Are you saying from your observations that essentially because Gateway connects to Pedersen that they're using that avenue to avoid some of the traffic on Bayview and or St. John's?
That's correct. In addition to that, many of the motorists come through the roundabout and literally use Pedersen Drive it's similar to 404 and speed right down the street. And we've got retirees on the street. Many of us have little kids, and our concern is we do not want it to get to a point where someone has to die for there to be action. And the reason for us coming today, and there's one thing I want to mention because this is important. There's a gentleman that's sitting up here who went through this process about 9 years ago. I sat on his porch yesterday, and here's exactly what he said to me. He goes, "Garth, I'm defeated." And I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I've tried this process, I've gone through it. I spoke to the previous mayor, I spoke to the current mayor, by phone, I was told we're going to do something about it." He goes, "I'm actually quite happy that you've decided to take this project through."
Well, I think large part is thank you to your efforts and the efforts of your fellow residents, so appreciate it. Thank you.
Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Brown, thank you very much for coming, and the rest of the residents in the area. Have you also noticed an increase in traffic due to the more commercial and retail popping up within the area?
Yes, to some degree. But I think overall, whether it's the commercial or whether it's purely just motorists just flying down the street. And let me give you, here's a perfect example. Friday and Saturday nights in particular, for whatever reason, we've got cars, maybe, you know, somebody sent out a memo and said, you know, Pedersen Drive is a street, you got to be out on the weekend. And you've got cars that are flying down the street. I kid you not, when I say this to you, at 80 kilometers. You've got kids on the street, or on the sidewalk that's playing. And last night, myself and Michael, he was actually on my porch, and there's a car driving. I swear to God, he was going at least 80 kilometers. And his daughter had a ball that just went on the road. And his first reaction is, I hope she does not cross the street.
No, definitely, and I think anyone, and I noticed through the report that you definitely met the two first warrants, and it's just that third one that talks about the traffic counts. But I think that, I mean, I've driven down down Pedersen many times, and I'll agree with you that it is a very busy road, and people do use it as a throughway from what I've noticed, and they do go at a high rate of speed. And so I think that this is something that is definitely needed. I look at it similarly, and I'm sure Councillor Humphreys will probably bring it up about golf links when they looked at putting in the speed bumps to help to alleviate some of those traffic concerns. So yeah, I'll be in support of this. So I appreciate you for continuing to bring this forward and getting this done.
There's one more thing I want to mention, because this is quite poignant. Through the back and forth communication, I got an email from the gentleman, Michael Batt. And in it, he said, after they went through the data analysis, he said, Pedersen Drive is 1 kilometer short of what would propel you to actually get traffic calming measures. That being said, I have it in an email. I have the proof. We're going to recommend to council that you get the traffic calming measures. When the councillor, Michael Thompson, sent me the report that was going to be sent to council, probably has been sent to council, it clearly said on it, we do not recommend traffic calming measures for Pedersen Drive. So when I saw this, I thought to myself, why would he say that, yet put this in the report? And so for me and many of the residents that are here, it was important that we came here and really articulate how important it is. And I'm going to say this because I said it earlier. The only way to understand the electorate is to walk in their shoes. Come down to Pedersen Drive, spend a few hours, and you'll see what the residents and myself witness every single day.
Well, once again, thank you very much for coming and giving us that perspective. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Mr. Brown, for coming tonight. And I hear your passion and your residents' neighbors' passion as well. You sound like me about 20 years ago on golf links when I advocated for traffic calming measures for the street on myself and other neighbors. And you're right, you have to live there to really understand it, or be on the street to understand the magnitude of some of the speeds. And in looking at the traffic warrants or the warrant plan, you're very close, so close to meeting those warrant plans. You know, from my perspective, I think your street warrants them, just in terms of you're that close to meeting the objectives, right? So the discussion tonight is very important. Your delegation tonight is very important. Your neighbors being here and your neighbors delegating is very important, because we're hearing you loud and clear. Now it's time for us to make a decision, and sometimes things change. So I just want to say thank you very much. Continue to advocate regardless of what happens here tonight, because that's what you need to do if you're feeling that same passion. I just have one quick question for you. Are you aware of, and I hope the answer is no, but any accidents?
Don't lead the witness, Councillor.
I'm trying not to. But I'm hoping that there were no accidents or things that have happened on your street because of speed. Are you aware of any?
Mr. Brown?
No, but I want to bring this up again.
No, I'm thankful for that.
No, but that's important. That's important. I need to reiterate how I started this.
You want to avoid it?
No, I want to reiterate. The only reason why what happened in Leaside, and I know Leaside quite well because I lived there for many years myself. I know the area where the little kid died. The only reason why it gained national attention, it's because it was tied to a politician. That's the only reason why. And it took someone's life.
Terrible.
Someone had to die for that particular councillor, who, by the way, is no longer there, okay, for there to be speed bumps in that area. Leaside today, as we speak, when they ask for a speed bump in this particular area, they get it. My mom still lives there, so I know what I'm talking about.
My best friend lives there, so I know what you're talking about.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sir?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're not released.
And actually, Leaside started the many signs that have appeared all over about driving slowly and watching for children. We have one in Aurora as well. Actually, it's good you came tonight because last week Council didn't have enough time to get to this item. So it's good that you're here for the discussion. And I was going to speak to it, and what I was going to say was the residents are very upset and determined. They're just going to keep coming back until we decide to do this. So maybe we should do this. But I think from a staff point of view, they have particular criteria that they have to adhere to in order to make a recommendation to council. So the staff report and how council receives it and perceives it can be two different things.
Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Brown, and really appreciate your passion and your commitment to seeing this through and having sat through something similar as all of us had a couple of years ago with McMaster and Mavernack and the other streets, Kennedy. We understand the the fear that that many of us who are parents go through when we have young kids who play on the streets and so forth. And so it's hard to argue against spending capital on safety, and so I'll definitely be for placing speed bumps on Peterson. And I'm also familiar with Peterson, given that my chiropractor's there. I go there every week, and so I'm familiar with that. I go to LCBO once a year, so I am familiar. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the conversation.
All in favor of receipt and refer, please. Contrary, that's carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. We appreciate you coming out, and your other neighbors as well. Thank you so much. Anybody here believe that once a year to the LCBO thing? You can tell we're almost out of school, right? It's almost school out day. Council will move into, first of all, the consent agenda, There's 3 items, C1, 2, and 3. Would anybody like one of those pulled to the regular agenda, please? Seeing none, if I could have a motion to approve it. Councillor Gardner.
C3, please.
I'm sorry?
C3.
Okay, we'll move that to the end of the regular agenda then.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. May I have a motion to accept items C1 and C2? Councillor Gardner, Councillor Perry, all in favor? Using your tablets, please. C1 and C2, Ishida.
Sorry.
Okay, we'll just go back and do it by hand. And apparently I haven't voted. I can't get in. But I vote in favor. Okay, now we'll do this again, all right? Using your tablets, please. That carries. Will, sir.
I just want to understand the process. So it's my understanding that you said that we're moving C3 to the end of the regular agenda, but isn't it the regular process that we discuss it now while we're in consent, pass it, or
Councillor
not
Gardner
pass it?
asked to move it to the regular agenda.
Okay. Because I think it was a different process last week, but anyhow.
Well, we've also got 3 items here that I think we should deal with respect to the public.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. Council, C1, the traffic calming is first, and I may suggest that we move R6 and R7 forward because there's people in the audience for both of those. Councillor Humphreys firsting it, moving it. Councillor Thompson seconding it. Oh, I'm sorry. The clerk is keeping me on task here. I'm going to presume we're pulling C1, and I'm going to presume we're pulling R6, which is the United Church. That's just a guess. But items C2, does anybody want C2 pulled? I guess I don't have to. I'll go through it. Okay, R6. See? Thank you, Councillor Humphreys, for saving me. C2, would anybody like C2 pulled? C3? A1? I just ask if anybody wants them pulled. A1? A2? A2? Accessibility. Okay. R1, Library Square. Councillor Gartner. R2, advertising program. R3, menorah lighting. R4, the interim forecast update. Councillor Thompson. R5, the cleaning of catch basins. R6, that's already been pulled by Councillor Humphreys. R7. Anybody wish to pull R7? Councillor Gartner. R8, draft plan of condominium, Sterling Cook. Acceptance of municipal services, Knights Creek. R10, the application for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for Dormer Hill. Seeing none. R11, the Aurora Farmers Market and Artisan Fair bylaw. Nope. Okay, so I have C1, A2, R1, R4, R6, R7, R8. We in agreement? C1, A2, R1, R4, R6, R7, R8. May I please have a motion to accept the items not requiring separate discussion? Thank you, Councillor Maraca, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. All in favor? Using your tablets, please. So may I suggest, that passes, may I suggest then we start with C1, move to R6 and R7, then back to the regular course. Councillor Humphreys moved that. Councillor Tom, will you second that for me?
Why are we with R6?
United Church, and there's a number of people here for it.
Oh, okay.
Okay? All in favor then of moving those? Contrary? That's carried. Someone put C1 on the floor, please. Councillor Humphreys? Mr. Clerk? Yep. Okay, so Councillor Thompson, you want to put the alternate on the floor? Councillor Humphreys is already. All right, so that would be the alternate. Councillor Thompson, you wish to speak to that?
Last week we had a little bit of discussion with regards to the warrants and why there was a difference between Pedersen and golf links in terms of the minimum volumes. Mr. Muno came back and said it's because of the difference in classifications for the streets, one's a collector versus a local roads. But, you know, in looking through the warrants, and there's, you know, unanimous agreement that it meets the first two warrants, and when it comes to the third warrant, the speed, to me, it's 1 kilometer off. It's, you know, it's a minor variance in terms of what it is, so I'm fine with that. But interestingly enough, when you look at the vehicles, the minimum volumes, the warrant talks about 1,328 vehicles. But looking back at some older reports, I found one from 2015 where our former director of IES wrote about Pedersen, and while they looked at the traffic volumes a little bit further east on Pedersen, they had it identified at 2,200 vehicles going through. And so, you know, I certainly support our policies and the use of the warrants, but when I look at the prior reports, I look at this current reports, to me, I think that 1,500 vehicles is certainly something that can be met on certain days. Maybe at this time when they took the parameters and took a look at it, it was only 1,328, but given prior reports, I'm comfortable moving forward with Pedersen, and so I support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Humphries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much, and I agree with Councillor Thompson. It's just at the tipping point. It's just too close, and it's safety. I think the traffic calming measures work really well, and it will protect the residents in this area, in particular, the children that are out there playing in these cars. The volumes are really, really high, and the speed limit being 1 kilometer lower could be the timing of the study. But I'm in support of traffic calming measures on both these streets. And I do have one quick question, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno. Are the traffic calming measures on Golf Links going to remain the same that they have today?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we've identified that as part of the report, so we'll need direction from Council. I mean, if Council wants to direct us to also replace those existing speed bumps on golf links, we can certainly do that. Our recommendation from staff would be that they be coordinated in 2019 when the golf links is scheduled for resurfacing. So if Council so wishes, we would replace those speed bumps at that time with speed cushions.
Oh, okay. No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, the reason I was asking, I'd like them to remain as they are. So I'm okay to leave the speed humps. I think that the residents there would prefer that than the speed cushions. But that's 2019's decision. So at this point, glad that they're remaining as well there. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll agree with my colleagues. I mean, I think the numbers are very, very close, and I think it does support it. I think one of the aspects that when you look at the opening of the Hartwell Bridge, which I think has increased the volume because it's definitely made it a throughway, because you can go from one end to the other now, and so I think a lot of more people and more residents are using Hartwell / Pedersen right through, and so I think this does. I think if you were to do it today, I think those numbers would change that are in front of us, and it wouldn't be 1328 anymore. So, yeah, I'm in full support of moving forward with this.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I agree with all of the comments. And it is rare that we get so many people in the council chamber who have such dedication to an issue because of safety. So I thank you all for coming, and I will agree with this motion.
Councillor Gardner. Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. And as I said when I introduced the speed bumps earlier in the term, the idea is to slow down to the speed limit. It's not to make it a big bump, and it works. The only people that are affected are the people that speed. If you're going the speed limit, which is in a residential area, should be in the 40 to 50 kilometer, you can go over those speed bumps just as you do on McMaster, easily and calmly and safely for the residents. And I think it's for safety for our residents is the most important consideration that we have here on the council table. So I'm in full support, and I appreciate everyone coming forward to make sure that you were heard. And it's real. So I know that the culture of driving is vastly different than, say, maybe 15, 20 years ago in our community. People move at lightning speed because they're in a big rush. And as Councillor Maracus pointed out, this is now an arterial road. You can go from right over into Leslie Street. So we'll probably look for other measures as that route goes along. So thank you very much for all attending. I'll be in support.
Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to be brief. I'll probably say the same thing multiple times this evening. I think everybody around the table is more or less in agreement with this. I understand that we're in election season. I'm not really interested in listening to any politicking tonight. I think we should make some decisions based on what we have in front of us. So I'll call the question.
That means I can't speak. I wanted to say one thing before we call the question, Councillor Perry. I certainly support the recommendation. Staff does what they're supposed to do, which is work to criteria, and then it comes to council to look to see if that may be appropriate or not. And obviously, we've changed the recommendation. But I did want to request, so everybody here in favor of the traffic calming measures and things like that. Photo radar has been approved in principle, but the regulations are not out. So at some point, even with the new change of government, if that comes out, I'd like to see you all come back and support photo radar when the regulations come out, because that will make a substantial difference to how our streets are traveled on. So, and because I broke the rules, I'll let Councillor Kim break the rules. And then we'll...
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say that I was not given an opportunity to politic, so just thought I'd give myself now.
On that note, we'll call the question, please, using your tablets. Thank you. That passes unanimously. So that's great. Your work here is done.
Are here. Perhaps Mr. Ramuno or Mr. Downey can just speak to some timing for those speed bumps, when the residents can expect to see them on Pedersen.
Mr. Ramuno.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to the Pedersen speed bumps, as per our policy, I think one of our requirements is actually just hold a open house, and we can do that as soon as possible, just to explain to the residents sort of the final design. And I think, speaking to staff, we can try and get those installed hopefully later this summer or early in the fall. With respect to the golf links, our recommendation is to, because they already have speed bumps, is defer the replacement of those speed bumps with new ones in 2019. But we'll certainly, after tonight, schedule a required open house with the Pedersen residents to just show them the final design once we complete that, and that can be done in-house as soon as possible.
Councillor Tom?
Thank you. I just want to know if council, we spoke of this last week, I think, about council's potentially, for lack of a better term, being lame duck with respect to the provincial legislation passed end of July, I believe, July 27th. Will that affect the installation of speed humps
no,
in any way?
It's not substantive.
No?
No.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll move to R6. That's the site plan approval for the United Church. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Humphreys and Perry. Speakers, please. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't imagine any new information coming to the council table this week. I think as well we all were very much in favor of it last week when we discussed it. I'd like to put a formal motion on the table to call the question.
Sir, is there a second? Councillor Maracas. All in favor of calling the question? I'm sorry, hands high, please. Opposed? That is carried. Calling the question, please. All in favor of the motion on the floor. Using your tablets, please. That carries unanimously. Your work here is done. R7. We'll move to R7. Yeah, you're welcome to stay. It's a little anticlimactic, I know. R7, the zoning bylaw for the Barra Group. Is there? Someone put that on the floor. Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Is there a second, please, for R7? Councillor Abel, thank you very much. Comments or questions to R7? Councillor Gartner.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. I just called the question so we could have a recorded vote on it.
Certainly. If there's no further comments or questions, then all in favor of calling the question? Oh. No, it's just... Okay, so what it is... Okay. Councillor Gartner just pulled it to have a recorded vote. Councillor Tom?
Thank you, Mayor Dodd. My question is for Mr. Amuno. Mr. Amuno, we got updated pictures on the design. Last week, I raised concerns about public planning's request that the heritage character of the area be incorporated into the site plan. And looking at what was first presented versus this, obviously there's been some minor changes, but the document you handed out today says the latest revision. Has anything changed between last week and this week?
Mr. Amuno?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. And again, I just received these. I've been working with the applicant, so these came in just the other day, and I was able to provide them to council today. There are some subtle changes, and the top two renderings are the latest revision, and the changes are really with the fenestration. The windows are a little more traditional. They are narrower to reflect sort of the character of some of those earlier type of townhomes. With respect to more of a wholesale change in the architecture, based on comments I received from the applicant's architect and our own control architect, a planning partnership. Again, they're of the opinion that the flat roofs proposed here are in character with the area, because based on the, albeit they're all commercial properties up and down Yonge Street, they're all flat roof properties, and if we try to introduce more of a pitched roof or a Victorian type of roof, it would deem to be, not as, out of character. So I think the architects and our own control architect are still of the opinion that the flat roof is more in character here, but the changes are related to the windows, a little more narrowing of the windows, less of the articulation and the blocking, but they are still, a flat roof. The biggest change from the what council saw at the public meeting about a year ago, which is the first rendering identified as original submission, is reorientation of those blocks, that we have the 6 units facing Yonge Street, as opposed to originally they were N units.
Thank you, Mayor Don. Thanks, Mr. Amuno. I don't think I have an objection with the flat roof, because even along Yonge Street, those commercial buildings all mostly have flat roofs and stuff. So again, it's more just the finishings, and again, I don't want to be nitpicky. I just thought after this, after tonight, though, if we pass the site plan, is there any more room for working with the applicant on some of the maybe exterior finishes, just to maybe bring it a little bit more in line with something that again, you can't ever recreate historic architecture. It ends up looking bad. So if this is the best they can do, that's totally fine. I just think that there may be, for the benefit of not only the residents who live around the area, but again, it's our main street. I just think perhaps there's a bit more work that can be done to better fit this into that context. I'm not sure if you have a comment for that.
Mr. Mayor, certainly there's always room to work, and my commitment to council, and I'm going to work with the applicant to ensure that the final materials are of the highest quality, to ensure that we have sort of the best design along this Yonge Street frontage. So I will continue to work with them, and they have indicated that they are willing to continue to work with staff and council with respect to the final materials and colors and et cetera.
Thank you. Last question. The building, I guess it's Center Street in Yonge, the new condo building that went in. Centro, is that what it's called? Mm-hmm. The exterior finishes in terms of brick was a lot lighter when it actually was built than what was presented to council, at least in my opinion. And obviously it presented a building that looks quite different from what was presented. So what measures are in place or can be put in place to ensure that that doesn't happen in this case?
Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're correct, Councilor Tom. Unfortunately, they were a lighter colored brick that were eventually installed, and after that situation, myself and staff are working with each applicant to ensure that prior to commencement of, with respect to installation of the brick or stone veneer, that we sign off on those before they actually, the masons start installing that actual finish. So we're on top of that, and we're going to ensure that what's brought to council is actually constructed on site with respect to colors and materials.
Thank you.
Councillor Humphries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you so much for that comment in terms of the color of the brick. I noticed that I think this developer actually mentioned that they were, trying to mimic or build like the Treasure Hill property further south. North on Yonge, and they've done, I noticed Treasure Hill has done a great job in keeping with the color brick and exterior look that they have promised. So good to hear that, and hopefully they'll continue to do the same on his property. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, using your tablets, please. All in favor? All opposed? That carries on a vote of 8-1. Thank you. All right, we'll go back to A2, the Accessibility Advisory Committee meetings. Does someone put that on the floor, please? Councillor Gardner, thank you. Second, Councillor Tom. Speakers, please. Seeing no speakers, Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm not in favor of the design of the Library Square. And
Councillor Perry. Thank you. Councillor Abel to the Accessibility Advisory Committee meetings, please.
The Accessibility Advisory Committee met last week, Wednesday, and we did not approve the minutes as we have seen them here. We had a good debate. Our clerk, Mr. Durand, was with us, and I'll let him give his explanation. But the members of the Accessibility Advisory Committee felt that the vigor and the language that we were using to express our thoughts on the Library Square design were not accurately put into the minutes, so that's why we did not approve them.
I'm going to go to the clerk. Mr. Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think Councillor Abel did a good job summing it up. The committee thought that the minutes weren't strong enough to reflect their feelings on Library Square, but as I explained to committee last week and to the Accessibility Committee, there's only so far we can take it with the no note or comment provisions of the Municipal Act. So I would also just like to add that the committee didn't receive the minutes. The minutes still of the meeting still exist, but the committee did choose not to receive them.
So if we chose, and Mr. Clerk, we could refer these back to the committee?
For what?
No. So then...
well, Mr. Mayor, the first version of the minutes, or the comments in the item 1, on page 8 of 15, were very different than the version that we received for in our accessibility. I mean, they did change a lot, but at the first draft, all that was said was that we requested that a number of the barrier-free parking spaces be increased, and that the current book drop-off was not in the proper spot for us. So we've come a far way, but we just didn't understand, or we wanted to have council appreciate our thoughts from the Accessibility Advisory Committee. We were also, another point was made about that we're not recorded, where other committees are. And maybe we could ask our clerk why that is the case, why some are and why some aren't.
Mr. Clerk, do we actually record minutes for
through you, Mr. Mayor,
keeping?
They're a means to an end for us in terms of our minutes. We record the meeting. From the beginning, we record more difficult meetings. Heritage is an example where you can often get 8, 9 recommendations on a report. So we do record them, but it's a means to an end, and we delete them right after. So, and the final record being the minutes. So, it is something that Councillor Abel's pointed this out. We will look to tighten it up when we do a board and committee review this summer, going into the next term of council, to nail this down on how we exactly recording and what we do with the recordings. Yeah, currently right now we do record the meetings. We anticipate to be tougher with longer motions.
Thank you, Councillor Abel.
I think that's just about it, Mr. Mayor. Just I thought I would represent our committee at the council table with the fact that, and I'll leave it when we get to the item, that there are concerns about the design.
Thank you. Councillor Perry.
Thank you. It's just my belief that the reason that the Act states out that we record minutes without note or comment is to avoid the politicization of those meetings. They are an advisory role to us, so I am fully in support of receiving the minutes, although they don't go as far as Councillor Abel would have liked for them to go. They did, from my understanding, cover off what the motions were that were made, and that's what they are intended to do. So thank you.
Councillor, and we're talking about the minutes from May the 9th, no other meeting. Councillor Abel. Councillor Gardner for first time, pardon me.
Thank you. I think we're all missing the point. The point is that the Accessibility Advisory Committee is not happy with this design because they don't think it's accessible enough. Am I correct on that? Oh, actually, I can't do that. But that's my understanding, that the committee does not think that this is an accessible design in their opinion and for their use.
Thank you. Councillor Abel. Councillor Humphreys, sorry, first time.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if the committee's trying to articulate that they're not in favor with some of the design of Library Square, would it be? I think the committee could perhaps list some of the things that they need or would like to see in the new design, and that could be taken into consideration. I know that the chair has often said they want us to be leaders in accessibility versus just the standard. So I'm not opposed to having the accessibility committee perhaps take a minute to review and provide some of the recommendations to us. I don't think that's
that could be a motion from the committee at the committee.
Okay, because I think I'd like to let the chair and Councillor Abel know that if they're not happy, the minutes aren't really reflective, that there's probably an opportunity to still dig in and provide a list of things that we should consider for the new design.
Thank you. Councillor Abel, second time.
I appreciate some of the comments. The recommendations of committees are just recommendations, as Councillor Perry noted. We had a recommendation from Heritage just recently recommending designation of properties on Yonge Street. We had PRAC recently recommend and endorse 2 ball diamonds on the Hallmark land. So they do play a role, and the recommendations are often considered by council when they're making decisions and helps them form their decision. The minutes, as we said, do not fully express what the committee had said, and I will bring up to the best of my ability what those concerns are quite specifically. We've seen 2 versions. One was on your general committee, was very far short of what had actually happened in the meeting, and the minutes are better, but it's not exactly what we wanted stated, and the clerk gave his reasons for it.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Seeing no other comments, all in favor of receipt of the minutes? Using your tablets, please. That carries 7-2. We'll move to item R1. And there was a lot of discussion last week. I would like some new information, please. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Maracas, Councillor Perry. Comments or questions? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not trying to make any political statements tonight. I do have several concerns. The first one, and I'll change my order, is with the number of accessible parking spaces. If we leave the parking that's up on the east side of the Cultural Center, then we'd have enough accessible spaces for the new building and the cultural center. But from what I can understand from the plan, the latest version, last version of the plan, it seems to me there are 2 accessible parking spots. And there's something that looks like it's on the street, but I don't see how it could be accessible. But, you know, there's thousands and thousands of people who visit the library, and they're complaining that there aren't enough accessible spots now. And the baby boomer bulge is really going to be hitting us soon. And we are going to have more need for accessible parking spots. It makes no sense to me that a facility that's that important to the town, that has that many visitors, would have 2 accessible parking spots. So I certainly can understand where the committee's coming from, and it's not only accessible in the way that we understand it, it's also accessible considering aging. The second concern is, for me, I just don't have enough information about the building. I think it looks fine. I've been raised with modern buildings and modern art, and I think it'll be quite a shock to the downtown, but I think it'll also be very interesting. But we didn't have any information from the architect. We don't have any idea what kind of features are going to be in this building that are going to be there specifically to cope with climate change. And as you'll see from the Lake Simcoe report shortly, hopefully, the 2 things that are going to be most significant will be extreme weather events and windstorms. So I would like to know how this building is being designed and built to accommodate that.
Well, at this point, we're not even talking about the building. That still has to go back to council.
Yes, I believe we are, because we're approving this design.
Mr. CIO, are we approving a building tonight?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the actual actions that would be approved right now would be the laneway and the tendering of the parking lot, and you'd be advancing final design for the building, which we would bring back to council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. I have to disagree. The recommendation is that schematic design, but it's still option 1, schematic design for the expansion to Church Street School, which includes 3 floors and theater, be approved. So the architects have been working on this for a long time. We've paid them a lot of money. I don't think they're going to come back with a completely different building. So I think we are approving this design. The other thing that nobody's talked about is energy planning. How is this building?
Councillor, we're not talking about the design of the building. We're not talking about how it's going to be built.
Apparently I am.
Well, I know that you are.
Yes,
but
I know,
we're not
and we
dealing
did
with that
talk
tonight.
about it last week as well.
But we're not dealing with that
well,
tonight.
That's fine, but I am just going to say that I certainly hope, for the good of the community and the good of our tax dollars, that this building will have some very serious energy planning. We know that all levels of government are pushing community energy plans and corporate energy plans. So I'll leave that one.
Well, I would think everyone with council would agree with that.
Well, we have to make sure it happens. With the planning, and I know from last week that you said this is coming. We don't have a business plan. We don't have an operations plan. We don't have an activities plan. We don't know how many staff we're going to need. We don't know how much money this is going to cost the taxpayer in operating. And I'm very disappointed that we are asked basically to approve something in principle without having these details. We've spent a long time coming to this point, and we have to congratulate ourselves. This is the first council of 5 councils that's figured out what to do with the square. I mean, really, we should all be patting ourselves on the back. But we shouldn't be rushing at this point with all these important details. So that is my opinion. With respect to...
Councillor, you're at time, please.
I'll wait then.
Yep. Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I reflect back to the concept of community space, and that's what we're talking about in this report is community space, Mr. Mayor, so I'll continue on. The design calls for us to put a building in the square. I talked to the architect. I asked him, why is that building there? When he interviewed me a one-on-one, actually, Councillor Thompson came in and joined us, and he said I was directed to put that building there. And then at a later date in council, general committee, he said that it was his opinion that for programming that this would be best for the library square to have that building added on to the cultural center. So that's why we have to remove the parking down below, is because we can't put the square up above. And I hearken back to the best community space that we have available still. It's our armory. It is ground level, multi-purpose, and the financial implications of making our deal with Niagara Falls, Niagara College, is that we have to now build a community space. So to build that community space, we have to tell 300,000 people that visit the library square, you're going to have to park further away. We're telling our accessible needs, you're going to have to move farther away. So this addition is for community space that we gave away. And it's going to cost us $26 million. And our report, the first report we got on our space needs and repurposing was $2.1 million to repurpose the armory. So that's a huge financial implication. So I think we really should reflect back to what it is this building has, as Councillor Gartner says, since the design makes us remove the parking because we have to put that building there. We're putting in a 240-seat theater, a theater that doesn't have a backstage, that is 4 meters high. It can't really bring in theater sets and such up 3 stories. So it's more of a good concert hall, which is great. And I asked Mr. Rumuno, and I copied our director of the Cultural Center, to give us an idea of why we should be expanding this programming for a concert 204-seater. And I was given a reply that in their AGM, they had a recap of 2017. They had 15 events, music events, and a capacity of 150, and we weren't able to see if they were at capacity. But do we really need to build that? I'm just wondering, and if we're consulting with music theater, they can't really use it. And if it's a multi-purpose room, floor, can the farmers market come in there? Can many of the other groups, the Optimists, Lions Club, Music Aurora, Sport Aurora, Bridge Club, these are all groups that we said we were going to provide community space for. So I don't see any of them being consulted on this. And now I know everyone's...
Councillor Gartner, point of order. And your point of order is?
We never said that we were going to build a new building to accommodate the community groups that came to us to ask for space. And I don't want to give anybody the wrong impression, because the question of privilege is that...
No, you said a point of order.
Point of order. I'm not sure, but things are being said that I don't believe are based in fact as to what happened in the council chamber?
That would be a question of privilege.
No. Then I'll go for question of privilege, Mr. Mayor. I understand. Thank you, Councillor Abel, but for all of the things you're saying, but
Okay,
that one is not true.
Councillor Abel, bring back to the facts, if you would, please.
Page 7 on our report, the Cultural Master Plan, which aims to attract new and creative talents, boost tourism, enhance quality of life, cultural resources and opportunities in Aurora. The plan also cites the expressed community need for a cultural hub to support networking and collaboration through the development of a multi-use cultural facility within the Library Square. So we are looking for a community space, Councillor Gardner, that's what I was referring to. And we have to build that because we don't have anywhere else to build a community space. We've given one away. So my point is that we're spending $5 million on the Armory, $26 million on this new theater, and we haven't addressed any of the community space needs of our community. That we did all this vast consultation with back in 2015 and 16. The last thing we did on the cultural precinct was we all met here and we asked a question, and the question was, what would bring you downtown?
Okay, Councillor, you got about another 30 seconds. Unfortunately, the clock reset.
I don't know what you're saying, Mr. Mayor. It looks like I've got 120.
Time is what I'm saying. You got 30 seconds.
You're going to give me 40 seconds?
30.
You're going to give me 30? I'll wrap up then. So I don't think we need to build this building, is one. And if we don't need to build this building, then we can redesign the Library Square. And that would be in the best interest of the library and accessibility, and in the best interest of financial prudence, fiscal responsibility.
Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure we could put up a shack for $5 million on this site. But we'd still have to go through this process to figure out what council as a whole is deciding, so that then we can do the operational costs, because the operational costs are very different between a reproduction of the Armory on this site, like I've heard mentioned, just a empty square box where we can just stuff as many people as possible whenever, wherever they would like to go. This little small box will fit everyone whenever they need it, no problems, no questions asked. But I think the operational cost changes if we're looking at a 2-story building or if we're looking at a 3-story building. So I don't know how we can expect staff to come back to us with operational costs if we don't give them a direction to go in. So I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Gartner that we need to get some operational plans going so that we fully understand what we're going to be spending our money on and how that's going to work out in the long run. But until we provide staff with the direction, I don't know how they come back and answer those questions. So the way I've understood it, the way that we've all spoken about it, we're providing staff a direction. They've given us a sort of a layout of a 3-story building with a theater, and so that will enable staff to go out and do the additional work that I think needs to be done, and I think I've heard from Councillor Gardner she thinks needs to be done as well. So I think it would be, putting myself in other councillors' shoes, it would be very difficult for an expectation of not putting the cart before the horse, as it's been said, by just saying, well, give us the operational costs. And I think if you're going to do a good job of giving us operational costs, we need to know what we're talking about, as opposed to some general rough ideas which come back and then the information might not be correct, and then we turn around and say, well, why wasn't this information correct? We asked for the right information. I think staff need to be given a direction for us to all agree on and understand on how to move forward. If Councillor Abel would like to see what's the size of the Armory? 60 by 1? you know, if that's the built form that we can all agree on around the table, then let's do that. But I think there's a general consensus around the table that we'd like to have 3 stories. Staff, the consultants have given us a rough idea of how that layout could function. And I'm buying into that. I agree with that tonight. I also heard Councillor Gartner's concerns with regards to the accessible parking. So I'd make a motion that on the eastern side of the property, you know, the eastern side of the cultural center of, you know, of that property, that at minimum 3 accessible parking spots be installed. Done, easy, right? I don't know what the big difficulty is. I don't know why that's the big hang up. You know, we want to see at minimum 3 accessible parking spots. It's not in the designs now. It's you know, I don't want to be crying over spilt milk. It's something small that we have an input over now, so I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Humphries has seconded. That's to add 3 accessible spots on the east side, so on Victoria Street.
We'll let the architects do what they do, but at minimum.
Can't we just vote on that? Apparently not. Councillor Humphries.
Dear Mr. Mayor, I'm fine to vote with that, but and I know this is not talking exactly to the motion, but are we? Maybe I need to save it, but I want to. Are we not still dealing with a concept, and we're going to decide the stories, and then go back into more details?
We're the
like eventually,
and maybe one of the challenges here is that we should have had 2 different voting procedures, one on Library Square, one on a building.
Absolutely, I think that's what we're getting confused with.
So, but at this point, right now, to Councillor Perry's amendment is to add 3 accessible parking spots.
I say add to Councillor Perry's point, let's add at least or at minimum, because we want to be ahead of the game when it comes to AODA.
Councillor Gardner. To the amendment.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Perry. That would certainly help. I think more spaces would be needed, but that would certainly help for the cultural center and the new building. But it's the library that certainly at this point in time gets the most number of visitors, thousands and thousands of visitors. And there's a lot of seniors. There's a lot of everybody, but there's a lot of seniors. And there's only 2 accessible spots for the whole of the library. Now, and frankly, the architect has come back. I think this is the 3rd time. Maybe it's the 4th time. And he's not been able to improve on that. So I think it's a huge fault.
It's about the width of the street. Councillor Perry.
But just to respond to that, Mr. Mayor, the first iteration came through with, I believe, 5 accessible parking spots right beside the library. And it was the library's request to make changes to the site to allow for a bigger turning radius, to allow for additional parking closer to the property to the north. Those changes were made to reflect what the library board was asking for. So if the argument is we need more accessible parking, great. But if the argument is, well, we can't put in the more accessible parking because it wasn't the library. I don't think it was the library board's intention to put us in a position where we lose.
Come back to the amendment, please?
In either situation. And so, Mr. Mayor, I'm just responding to comments made, and I'm explaining. The intent is fix what we can fix, and if we can add 3 new accessible parking spots, let's do that at minimum.
Councillor Abel, to the amendment, please.
Mr. Mayor, this is exactly what the Accessibility Advisory Committee was saying, is getting some accessibility close to the doors, and certainly this is a step in the right direction. It works very well for the cultural center and their 30,000 visitors. I would like to see something that represents the same for the library. So if it's tenfold, I'd like to see plenty more parking right by the doors, just as we're doing for the cultural center for the same reasons.
Mr. Rumino, From our report, page 11 and 15, which shows the bird's eye view, there's 10 spaces along the north side, the lane on the north side of the library. That's actually in the middle of the library. That little H is actually an entrance to the library, so that could certainly be an additional entrance to the library. It would require rejigging of that little snack bar. That's no big deal. Those 10 spaces, would they be considered accessible?
To you, Mr. Mayor, yes. So we could add accessible spaces along that laneway. In addition, just to add, we could also designate accessible spaces along the Yonge Street frontage, where there's current on-street parking. As council's aware, there's a ramp to the library along Yonge Street. So there's plenty of opportunity to add additional spaces either on Yonge Street or along the laneway where we've identified those 10 spaces. The current 2 spaces in front of the library were based on what the library currently has. And again, as Councillor Perry mentioned, we've expanded on that drop-off area with the 3 vehicles, but we can certainly add additional spaces along the laneway, Yonge Street, and as mentioned earlier, along Victoria Street. And that's not going to be a problem.
And we had the discussion at a previous council meeting with respect to Yonge Street and accessible parking. A month ago, a month and a half ago, something like that. Is that a second? Councillor Abel, you've already been on twice on the amendment. Is that correct? No? I'm sorry. Councillor Abel?
I know you wish. I want to just comment, Mr. Mayor, on the parking along Yonge Street. Accessible parking needs a wider berth, and you can't park there during rush hour. And when you bring a mobile wheelchair around the driver's side, you're actually out in the lane of traffic. So I'm not sure that that is a very practical solution to getting access to the library. The fact remains that we're talking about putting 3 accessible parking spots right by the door for the cultural center. I'm all in favor of that because that's what we said at the Accessibility Advisory Committee. We don't want to go farther away. We want to be better than that. We want to be closer or just leave it the way it is. So by putting 3 spots at the cultural center, that's the way it is. There's a drop-off area right there, meters from the door and the elevator. That's what we'd like to see in any design that goes forward.
Councillor Gardner. To the amendment, please.
No, I think I've said enough.
Using your tablets, all in favor of the amendment? If the technology works, it should go back to Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would only state, just to quickly finish off in my last minute, it's really easy to complain about things and not propose any solutions to it. There are solutions that are readily available to all of these concerns that I've heard. There's a rationale why we're moving forward in this way. It's so that we can get the plans in place so that we can figure out how much all of it's going to cost. Because like I said, it's different between a 1-story building, a 2-story building, or an 8-story building if we wanted to build one of those. So I think we're moving along the right track. I think we've consulted with groups throughout the process. We've been consulting for the last 20 years. So I think overall we're moving in the right direction. I look forward to voting on this.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just for clarification from my perspective, and I don't think I'm incorrect, is that, to Councillor Perry's point, I know 1, 2, 3 stories we're approving tonight, hopefully, a 3-story building. And, they'll include a theater and other programming space. But that final detailed building plans will be coming back to the new council. That this is a wonderful concept. I just want to make sure I'm still voting on the right thing. And we need this because, exactly to Councillor Gardner's point, and how do we understand operational costs and what it will, what we'll need to do to support a new building of this magnitude. So in order for staff to go forward, we need this information. I just want to make sure, Mr. Mayor, I'm clear.
I will go to the CAO to ask for that confirmation.
Sorry, I just have to ask again.
Mr. CAO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. In addition to those things, this is also required in order for us to develop a plan to go after grant funding, which has to include the scope of services that will be provided in the building, and we'd have to do a business plan, an operating plan, and so on in order to properly apply for funding as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. So through you, Mr. Mayor, that's great. And this feels like we've talked about this several times, and these same points keep coming up. But unless you have a council that's supporting the concept of this area, staff cannot write for any grants. So you have to have a majority, passing vote for this type of design for Library Square. And eventually, all the details will come back. That's why I'm trusting the process that, perhaps the accessibility issues, some of the baby programming space, some of the other, maybe the way the building looks isn't exactly what everybody is hoping for, and we're hoping that will come back with some incredible further ideas. That's great. That will come based on all the feedback this council and the public has shared and other boards, but that we're just doing this to finally get, stake in the ground to move forward and get costing, understanding, funding, grants, and then get to that next level. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Dow. I just want to be clear on a couple things. So with respect to the accessible parking on the north side near the 10 parking spaces on the laneway, there was an alteration that you see kind of a pull-in, because I'm presuming that's a one-way lane. You'll have a pull-in area to drop people off, pick up people, drop people off, and maybe drop books off or something. And then you'll continue on through the property to Victoria Street. That was altered, and I just want to get confirmation from someone who's on the library board. Paul just made, or Councillor Peary just made a comment that, because the original plans were that there was going to be more accessible parking in that area, and that, so I understand correctly, and someone from the library board can maybe tell me, that the library board requested the turning area through the consultation process. So I just like confirmation on that, how we came to that process.
Councillor Peary, may I go to you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if you remember, first designs we saw had, I believe, 4 or 5 accessible parking spots right at the front, and one of the concerns we heard from the library board as a whole was that we were losing our turnaround, pick up, drop off area, and this is how it was accommodated.
Councillor Tom.
Thank you. So I appreciate that clarification, and obviously that's something that in the design as we move forward can. I know we're laying the laneway and all that kind of stuff, the tendering of the parking lot. So that's, no matter what, this is the final design for that. Correct?
Mr.
What we see in front of us for the laneway and the parking lot is what we're going to be tendering out.
Mr. Nader-Rosny?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's what we expect to tender out, yes.
Thank you. And then the last bit of clarification I just wanted to mention, and this is a small piece. I mentioned it last week, though. And I understand that the Church Street School is synonymous with the Cultural Center because everyone refers to the expansion to the Cultural Center. But I think we should be specific when we talk about this because we are proposing an expansion to the Church Street School, which also houses the Aurora Museum. So we're not expanding the Cultural Center. Cultural Center is a great community group and a tenant of the Church Street School. And I just think we should be clear about that because, we are not expanding the Cultural Center, although they might be, expanding their footprint in the new building, and that's fine. That'll be for the council of the day to discuss. But I think we should be clear, and the report even states the building we're expanding is the Church Street School, not the Cultural Center. And obviously, again, just as a statement on this, I think this is something I'm in support of moving forward with. And as Councillor Gartner mentioned, councils of many varieties in town have been trying to do something with this area, and I think this is a significant step to actually do something positive that will, have a massive effect on our downtown, and I'm happy to support it. Thank you, Mr.
Councillor
Mayor.
Tom. Councillor Kim, Councillor Thompson.
Oh, it's my turn. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just busy just writing some notes in terms of all the points and critiques that we've received during this process, and I think process is one of the things that's been mentioned, that we're not following our process. And, that just brought me to discussing, process versus the end goal. And really, good goals should be pursued. I mean, the process is only good to the extent that it achieves the end goal. You may love your grandma, you may want to visit your grandma, and your grandma is the end goal, and there are many, many ways of getting to your grandma. And if you have a new Toyota Sienna, like I do, the car is still only useful if it brings you to your goal, and that's your grandma. So, without going further into that analogy, I mean, the very reason the process exists is to achieve the end result, right? And there are many processes. A process may offer construction during the time it takes, but unless that process is used to further the end goal, the process is pretty well worthless. The end goal, however, remains the same and still has inherent quality and value regardless whether the process exists. And so I just want to say that the end result is quite often superior to the process, and the end result is the purpose. The end result has more value than the process. So, I mean, that's enough about process, but I can go on. But I think in this case, the end goal is what we're trying to strive for, and I don't think necessarily a specific process is necessarily the end goal. We've been like a dog chasing its tail for the last 20, 25 years, and as we mentioned over the last year, that we've been at this for a long time, and I really feel that this dog, that's us, has finally caught its tail, or could be previous dogs, and the end goal has finally arrived. And being good stewards in our town finances were brought forward many times during this process, and I don't think any one of us are under the illusion that Library Square or the new building will be profitable. And if it is, that's great, but that's not, what's expected. We are investing in our community, we are investing in our residents, we are investing so that Aurora is a phenomenal place to live and play, as is our motto. And as I mentioned last week, this significant development on Library Square really helps to improve our morale, our identity of place. And that's largely based on the programs the town has and the facilities it has, and the architecture, and being proud of it, of where we live. And lastly, this is a public service building. Just like the SARC or ACC or the public library, this building will likely be a cost center. And the point is, we are adding capacity. We are adding real estate. And we made mention during another discussion at another council meeting that the best thing that we could have done with our finances many years ago was the land bank. And this is essentially what we're doing, is that real estate is going up and not laterally. So this is, I think, the best decision that we could do. I didn't finish my last thought as I was writing. But I think there's more than enough there to chew on. I'm very supportive of option one, and I know it might be expensive, and who knows, we may get a couple of $1 million or more from the federal grant, which is great. But even if we don't, I think this is well worth the investment, because we're investing in our people, and all those people that may have been, quote unquote, orphaned by disruptions. This is an opportunity to get some of that space back, and I hope that will answer Councillor Abel's question as to some of the the orphan groups. We can certainly plan to leverage some of that space for them.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I mean, obviously, I support the motion in front of us. From a global perspective, we, as mentioned many times, Council's been dealing with this for many, many years. Mr. Downey's written many, many reports. I think that, we can discuss the details and finer points, but in general, this satisfies what the vision has always been. It's always been about creating a community asset, developing a gathering space, and there's actually always been reference to building an addition to Church Street School. Even last term, when we had it before us for the demolition of the 2 properties, it was to build another building. It's always been part of the vision. Even prior to me coming onto council, when you look at some of the old reports, there was always talk about building another community facility there as part of the overall vision. It's part of our downtown revitalization strategy. It's one component that we keep looking at. And so for myself, knowing the different reports, knowing the global vision about creating that gathering space, having an additional building, I always saw it as a considerable investment. Last term, just the renovation of the AFLC cost $8 million. The JSC itself was over $20 million. I know from previous councils, the SARC was $20 million. So anytime you're looking at building a facility, which was always part of the plan, you knew that it was going to be a considerable investment, but the investment's worth it because it's for our community. And it's going to help revitalize the downtown over the long period. It's going to stimulate development. It's going to stimulate rebirth of different restaurants, retail outlets, and so forth. And it's going to bring people from the Four Corners to downtown. And so I think we've all wanted to see something special there. We may not all agree on the finer points, but I think we all agree that we want something special there, something to revitalize the downtown core and create a unique identity. And we can continue to work on the finer points, but we need to keep moving forward in this process. And so the motion before us says, let's build a parking lot, let's do the laneway, let's start moving forward with this project. It's what we all want. It's what council after council has wanted. Yes, there's still some questions, and I recognize them around the community facility, and we can continue to work through them, or the next council can continue to work through them, but let's not make a mistake. It's always been part of that vision, and you can look at multiple reports to see that.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Gartner for a second time.
Thank you. I'd like to just say the difference between community space and dedicated community space. We are looking at providing community space. I'm a little confused because we are talking about a schematic design, which is the first phase of the architect's process, and it is a rough study, drawings that illustrate the basic concepts of the design. So are we saying that all these concepts that the architect has brought to us over this many months, this is still the schematic design, the rough idea?
Through Mr. Mayor, a concept drawing, and this, I mean, there's different variations of definition of this, but I'll take a stab at this. The concept would have been the very first drawings that we had, which showed basically an attachment to the Church Street School. It really wasn't that well defined. In fact, we talked about 2 floors, but sort of the general size to give the layout of the rest of the property. And that's when we were having more of a conversation about Library Square itself as opposed to the building. So that was conceptually what was envisioned for that square and a possible addition to the Church Street School. The schematic design that's before you now is taking another level of refinement to that and considering the uses and how much space and actual, what would the actual footprint of the building have to be in square feet so that we can come up with a better estimate of the costs. And so this schematic, if you accept option 1, would say that you're generally agreeing to a performing space in the 200-seat neighborhood. You're agreeing to another full floor, basically, of community space to be programmed by our community services group for the most part, but available to the community for other uses. As you saw, many of the rooms are multi-use in their design and could be divided up and used by the community. And then you're also taking another level of refinement in the connection of that new building to both the existing Church Street School and the plaza below. So all of those things have been flushed out a little more, and it gives another floor, which gives us opportunity to put some other uses on the third floor of space in terms of programming. So we have not, nailed down exactly what that programming looks like. We have not nailed down who's in what space for what hours or who's controlling the space. But those would be some of the things that we would next have to go to at the same time that we're into the design phase so that we can build the business plans and so on. So the schematic sits between the concept, which we approved months ago, and the final design drawings, which we would bring to council, which would have, okay, this is a dance room, this is a 221-seat theater, and so on.
Councillor?
Thank you. You know, the last we did a lot of discussion over many months, and the last design before this iteration was a 2-story building. So where did a 3-story building come from? It didn't come from anything that was said at this table, as far as I know.
Okay. Mr. Nader-Rosny?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and that's why we've given the options of a 2- and a 3-floor building. The best use of the space from a construction perspective, and also utilizing or gaining enough space for programming, is in a 3-floor model. The lower floor is tucked into the ground, if you will, so it's like a basement on one side of the building. So it's not completely, functional. It's not functional. It's not regular space like you would have above ground. So by putting that 3rd floor on, you allow for 1 floor, which gives a nice interface at ground level to the plaza. At the back of that floor isn't going to have a lot of windows, for example. It's going to be too low. Then it gives you 2 floors above that are more traditional buildings with proper windows, and it gives us more room for programming. Even with the 3 floors of space that is in this plan, we are pretty confident that just with our own programming needs, from the point of view of the buildings that we've taken down and lost some programming space, as well as the transfer of the rooms at the library 100% to the library's control instead of from town's control, we're confident we could use all that space just with our own programming, as opposed to having to dedicate it to other groups.
Councillor?
Thank you. In mentioning the library is just so anxious to have those buildings, those rooms, and they did a whole plan of what their needs were, and I don't think it's ever been addressed by council. At least we've never discussed it and voted on it. So I think that's something that does need to come back to council as well. Okay, thank you, Mr. Nader-Rosny. I will say that, just commenting on the design here, and it was raised last week, in the multi-purpose room there's going to be a proper dance studio with a sprung wood floor and mirrors. I'm reading that directly from the report. This space is going to be used for fitness, but it's also going to be used for dancing lessons. I would like the council and the town to be very careful. We do not want to compete with any local businesses, and this is a space that will definitely compete with local businesses. So I know this is not the final design, but I think we need to seriously look at this. Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Nader-Rosny, we have to have a motion in place so that we can go out and get funding, heritage and cultural funding. The way this motion reads to me is that we are committing, from what the report is as it stands before us, we are committing to a 3-story building, a square, with a total cost of approximately $26 million. So if we go forward with this motion, to me it means that we are also committing to that funding and this building.
Mr. Nader-Rosny?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, when you're going for grant funding, it's a bit of a chicken and the egg scenario. So I don't think that anybody would expect that council is 100% committed to spending all of these dollars. However, we can't go out and try to secure grant money without a significant indication from council that they're committed to the project. So often for these larger projects, it'd be quite reasonable to go out, check the market, if you will, in terms of grants, see what's available, see what strings would be attached to that money by the various granting organizations, and quite often that might even have an impact on the plan. They might say, well, you'd qualify for more funding if there was more of this or less of that in the building. And so that represents another opportunity to come back and refine based on grant strategies, and ultimately that's when council would be asked to make their final commitment.
Councillor?
Thank you. Would it be possible, in your opinion, to say something like the 3rd point is that the 3 floors and theater be approved in principle, and that number 4 says the same until you get to the second comma, and there it would say, and that council commit to building a square and building that will include a museum and archives, cultural and performance space. Would that be enough for the funding?
I'm sorry. Mr. Nader-Rosny.
To you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure I understand the intent of adding the extra. I mean, the plan itself speaks to all of those possible uses, so I don't think it would conflict with what is being proposed, but I'd want to see it all in writing to make sure we're...
Okay, I think it's too late in the day for this, but to me it reads that we are going to commit to the square and the building as is in this report, and the funding, which is $26.3, I think, $1 million. So I would like to make it more generic and be able to include that a business plan comes back to us, an operational plan comes back to us before the final financial approval. To me, this is just a fait accompli. If we do this, we're committing to a 3-story building, basically what's in it, and $26+ million.
Mr. Nader-Rosny.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in order to put in funding applications for this kind of a project, for this size of a project, the funders would want to know that we have an operating plan in place and that the council is prepared to fully support not only the rest of the capital that's required, but also the operations. The last thing, particularly a federal provincial government wants to do, is fund something that is in trouble from go or doesn't have the proper resources. So their due diligence is pretty thorough when it comes to these kinds of these sizes of grants. So I'm confident that we would have to have that level of planning done in order to even just apply for the grants, let alone to bring it back to council for final approval.
If you would allow me, Mr. Mayor. So to be perfectly clear, council is not approving a 3-story building exactly as it is and $26+ million to be spent until we come back with a business plan, an operations plan, number of staff that we're going to need, etc. Full details to be disclosed to us and the public.
Mr. Nader-Rosny.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's right. Our understanding from this motion would be that we could go out to funders and say that council is committed to a building of this size, this magnitude, and that we've been sent out to get funding for it and to bring back a plan that council can ultimately approve both the final funding and the operating costs for at a later date.
Okay,
thank you. And included,
that's time, Councillor Gardner.
And included in this process, do a complete consultation of all groups who would be using this, because if the Winter Blues group wasn't consulted, I'm guessing others weren't either.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A theater in the round like they have at St. Lawrence, at St. Andrews College is an amazing stage. Has anyone seen it here? Mayor Dahl, you saw it. St. Andrews, that would be a spectacular theater for everyone to use. I would like to see something. So I just wanted to draw your attention to background on page 2. On December 5th, 2016, concept plan for the cultural precinct to involve the demolition of the former library and the decision was made in consideration after vast public consultation that took place in 2016. So at that time, we were doing the repurposing study, and we were also doing the Fotan library. Actually, that piece of property we were interested in, Fotan was doing the 6-story apartment buildings, et cetera, a 5-story parking garage. But what was said at that time was for a public space was a significant public realm of opportunities with utmost flexibility and adaptive reuse and redesign to reinforce the cultural role, a major influence on the public life throughout the year. And that was $2.1 million, and that was for the Armory at that time. And at 2016, what we did there was we said we were going to demolish and move forward with some designs at the Library Square. So we had nothing planned Councillor Thompson makes reference to, that it always was understood that there was going to be a building or a program building, an addition, but not necessarily to the cultural center, and certainly last term, not at all, because we hadn't even considered the Armory at that time. Now that we had the Armory, and you can see the significance of the Armory, what a great open public space we had, 8,000 square feet, and you know, some of the ideas that came forward were, you know, stage, sound, fireplace, dance floor, kitchen, open windows to incorporate our great town park for skating and music events. Sir?
Are we speaking to motion or speaking to the Armory?
Well, there is reference in the background. Councillor Abel, please maybe be a little more cogent.
Thank you. So what I'm saying is that identified are all the things that we want to do in a public open space. What we did is we gave away that space, and now we had to have that building. So at no time in 2016 did we publicly consult people and say, you know what, for $2.1 million we can provide that community space. Instead, we're going to spend $26 million and we're going to build it over at our library square. Unfortunately, that's what you call a mistake. And just because we have the money doesn't mean we should spend $26 million. At that point, there has been no public consultation on what was going into that building. We have not contacted, as I mentioned, a number before, but we didn't consult our chamber on this. We didn't consult our seniors on this. No one has been consulted on a 3-story open public space. It was never done. We can, and I know we're going to hear, oh, we've done this ad nauseum, we've been doing this for 20 years, but we never once talked about what we wanted and putting a $26 million 3-story addition to the cultural precinct. Never done. We talked about what we would do with the Armory for 2.1, but there's a huge gap in what we're talking about here. And it's a stretch to even suggest that we've done collaboration and consultation with the community on this building itself. The unfortunate part is that the building now makes us have a design that we have to remove the parking at the library, take our accessible parking spots and move them further away, and the drop-off further away, and put the parking lot up above so that people have to walk down and up to the library. Only because we made that mistake. Because we have to put that building there. So that's a huge financial consideration of $26 million that we did. So here we are with the building. We don't even know what we're putting into it except for a theater. We really haven't talked to no one else about it. I'm sure the farmers market isn't going to be thrilled going up 3 stories. I understand we've got an elevator in this that can take the baby grand up. Is that right, through you, Mr. Mayor? Could I ask that question?
I'm sorry, on the elevator?
Yeah, there's an elevator. We're putting in a super duper heavy elevator, big enough to take a baby grand up and down. And I don't want to guess, but I would less than 10 events have the baby grand. That's just an exorbitant amount of money to be considering and throwing around. So we're in this predicament.
Okay, Councillor, you are getting to time.
I've got 2:54,
well,
Mr. Mayor.
But you spoke before. Unfortunately, somehow the time resets on yours. You were at 2:11. You're actually over time. If you could wrap up, please.
That seems to be something going on. I'm constantly being cut off. Mr. Mayor, this is a design that is flawed. It's costing us a lot of money and a huge inconvenience to our residents. And it's because of this building that we don't need. Not this version anyways. So I won't be in support.
Yes, Councillor Rackus. Councillor Perry's already spoken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, we've heard from the residents, I think, loud and clear when it comes to Library Square and downtown revitalization. Doing no more or no less and sticking with the status quo is unacceptable to the residents. And I think what they've wanted, and they've stated loud and clear, they want a bold vision. And that's what this council has given them. Now let's talk about some facts. Facts. a motion was put forward by Councillor Thompson and myself in regards to the establishment of the cultural precinct, and that was in August 11, 2015, way before any talk of the Armory. A building was part of that initial plan. Consultation happened amongst every group, Chamber of Commerce. Everyone was involved in those consultation process. I think that this is providing an excellent opportunity, an exciting opportunity for our downtown. It's exactly what the residents have asked for. We're giving it to them. We're making a decision. We're moving forward. And I'm proud of this council in doing it. So I'll be in favor.
Thank you, Councillor Maracus. A couple of points. We're talking about design of a building. Get that time clock fixed, will you? Holy jeepers. Yeah, we turn him off. Turn off Councillor Maracus. And oh, I can get to speak forever because there's no timer. That's awesome. We put a third floor on the JOC because we thought it was a good idea at the time. And I don't recall if Councillor Abel moved it, but he was certainly in support of the third floor when we didn't have a particularly well-defined use for it. The proposed building that we are looking at is essentially replacing a building that was there. It was called the old library. It is essentially replacing it. We're not taking any parking space away. As a matter of fact, we're creating parking space because with the old Fire Hall Senior Center, that's actually going to become parking space, so we're increasing that. The 10 spaces was Councillor Thompson's idea to look at that laneway, widen that laneway and add that capability for parking. There is an entrance that can be used on the north side of the library, which has been closed for years. That can be used for drop-off, can be used for easy access to the building. When we talked about putting parking on Yonge Street, you indeed would have difficulty putting accessible handicap lane parking on Yonge Street as it is, which is why it was suggested we actually cut into the sidewalk to create the additional space. That's why we suggested that. I think we have worked long and hard. There's been a lot of good work that's done on this. Mr. Nader Rosny and I were talking with someone today about the design of the building, about the design of the performance space, whatever we want to call it, and how we can improve that. We are conscious to what our residents and what our very knowledgeable residents are saying about the use of this building and how we can make it better. And I would suggest that we are firmly committed to making this the best possible facility that we can do. It is, I've said it before, I'll say it again, it's the right thing at the right time, and I am fully supportive. Given the caveat that we're still looking forward, Councillor Gartner raised some good points, we obviously have to do that, but we need to get to a point to have a building to even get there to say, well, how can we properly use it? What's going to be the cost to run it? All those good things. It's an iterative process. Your points are very well taken, Councillor. We do need to do that. We have Councillor Pirie and then Councillor Tom for a second time.
Sounds good. I think one quick question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. McDougall. Have we had any conversations with the Potters Guild?
With who, I'm sorry?
The Potters Guild, with regards to potential relocations down the road?
Ms. McDougall, can you answer that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The Potters Guild, as we know, made a presentation here at Council about an interest in space. They know that, and we know that they have a desire for space, but they are looking for permanent space, and quite a significant amount of permanent space. As far as the design of the proposed building, we're still trying to vet through what is going to be available to them as it relates to the amount, and if there is, in the end, space that may or may not be available to them. They did participate in some information gathering as it related to what their needs may be, so that we could, as we went through this process, consider if that was going to be an option. Final decision will be of Council at that point if we can come back with any proposed square footage available.
Councillor?
Thank you again. Speaking, I think, on behalf of the Library Board, and I think anybody who's sat on the Library Board knows that I think the library would like to have that space back. So I'm just happy to hear that there are conversations that are ongoing on the matter. I didn't need a yes or a no tonight, but I'm just glad that they're being included and we're doing additional consultation with the affected community groups. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make one more comment. Councillor Gardner in her remarks talked about, you know, when we look at what programming may or may not be included, or when whatever council it may be, this one or the next, that it doesn't compete with local businesses. But I mean, I appreciate that concern, but I think sometimes it's unavoidable. So, for example, our fitness center competes with Good Life. Our squash competes with LA Fitness. You can play squash at the town, or you can go to LA Fitness to get a membership. They are competitive. You can choose one or the other. One might be cheaper. I think ours is, which is a competitive advantage. So we have to be clear that, you know, it's not obviously the town's objectives to compete with local businesses. It's to provide programming to our residents that the town council feels necessary, that our residents are requesting. And obviously we do that in full consultation with our user groups, our residents, and obviously members of council. So I don't see it that we're going to be competing, regardless of what we put in, with local businesses. That's not our aim or intention, because obviously it's not our intention to compete with LA Fitness when we provide squash programs, because they have squash programs as well. It's to provide recreation to our residents that fits the need of our community. So I just wanted to make that comment because I think it's important. And again, just to reiterate that, you know, we've talked a lot this term and for many terms about revitalizing our downtown and driving, investment from not only the public sector but the private sector into the downtown. And I think this is a good first step in the process. And I'm really excited that as we move forward, that this will be a dynamic space for the town of Aurora. And again, it will set us on the path to revitalizing Yonge Street and the downtown. And I have to just, again, I want to thank my colleagues for all the work that we've done on this over the course of this term and previous terms as well. And again, I'm very supportive of moving forward at this point. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Seeing no other comments, I will call the vote, please. So using your tablets, all in favor of the motion on the floor as amended. Your tablet, Councillor. That carries on a vote of 8-1. Thank you very much. We will take our break now. Please be back here by 20 minutes after 9. I'm sorry, we can't do 8, can we? Okay, we'll put that here before we do it. All right.
That's a good majority.
Well, sever, so, I guess. Right? I mean, then essentially, if you look at the same, there's like a little gap between one and five. Sure. Right? So long
Alrighty, Council, we are back in session. We're moving to item R4, the 2018 interim forecast update. Councillor Thompson, excuse me, you pulled that. Would you move that for us, please? Thank you. Is there a second, please? Councillor Maracas, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention that on page 4 talks about one of the reasons why there was a change in the forecast really has to do with a lower than anticipated tax assessment base. And I had a chance to speak with Mr. Elliott, but I thought perhaps Council would appreciate hearing not only just his thoughts about it, but with some of the challenges associated and why it's difficult always to get it right. So, here to Mr. Elliott.
Mr. Elliott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been in this line of work for a number of years, and forecasting assessment growth has usually been very fortunate for me. In the last couple of years, it's been a little more difficult. There's a couple of factors at work. We are slowing our growth, but at the same time, we still have a lot of work in the field that's ongoing. But the other challenge that we have is that MPAC has had a little trouble keeping up with call it booking what is in the field, and so if I anticipate and we work together internally, if I anticipate a 3.5 assessment growth, that number might be right on. But if MPAC becomes distracted in the last months of the year prior to the assessment roll, they may end up leave it in the field, which then becomes supplementary tax in the following year. And so between my sub-tax and my assessment growth, generally speaking, it's been working out pretty well in total, but in the last couple of years, it's just been off balance between what I budgeted for each of those and the actuals. And so on a go-forward basis, we've been looking at this and trying to figure out how we can better report those, and we're actually going to be showing taxes and subs as a singular number with the detail behind it, but sort of combining those two as a singular budget number as a target for the tax revenue for the year. And we see that will work more effectively for this kind of variance on the go forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments or questions on this item? And using your tablets, please. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. We'll move to item R8, draft plan of condominium application, Sterling Cook. Someone put this on the floor for us, please. Councillor Humphreys, thank you. Councillor Perry. Councillor Gartner.
Mr. Mayor, this has been, I don't know, before us, back and forth for a couple of years anyway, and I've always been opposed. So I'd just like to have a recorded vote on this.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments on this item, using your tablets, please. It carries 8-1. Item C3, the LSRCA board report. Councillor Gartner, you pulled that. Would you care to move that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will.
Thank you. Second, please. Councillor Humphreys, thank you. Back to you, Councillor Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Conservation Authority has undertaken some research to better understand the impacts of climate change with respect to their planting of shrubs and trees. And they use those to, among other things, reforestation and to manage stormwater. The problem is that with climate change, trees are going to be affected, so they're trying to make sure, you can correct me if I'm wrong, they're trying to make sure that they have a list of what trees to be planted that are going to be effective and won't be negatively affected by climate change. So they've developed a study, and it says in the report that it is going to be sent to municipalities so that municipalities can act on this information. So do you know if we have this or when we're going to receive it?
I don't know if it's been, Mr. Downey's looking quizzical. I'm sorry, I don't know if it's been sent. I'm assuming from the quizzical look that Mr. Downey has not received it. That would probably come through the clerk's office, and the clerk has not received it. So we'll check on that tomorrow and drop you an email.
Thank you, and it's important because we're planting all the time. We may as well be planting trees and shrubs that are going to be able to cope with climate change and not be wasting money. The other thing in that report is the Ministry of Municipal Affairs has something called 2018-2019 Intake 4 of the National Disaster Mitigation Program. So this is meant as well, if it's coming from municipal affairs, it's meant for municipalities. So the same question, do you know when we're going to get a copy of this? Because, again, disaster mitigation is important for us.
I don't know if I don't know if the clerk has received that. We'll check on that as well.
Thank you. This is directly from the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Report, and they're two important studies, so if we could make sure we get them as soon as possible, that'd be great.
Thank you. If there's no other comments or questions on this, all in favor, using your tablets, please. Thank you. We'll move to motions. And Councillor Gartner, you're up.
I think I'll read it.
I need a seconder first. Seconder, please, for Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Abel.
Whereas the town hired a consultant from Stantec to perform a Level 2 ASHRAE energy audit for town buildings, and whereas it included energy consumption levels for our equipment and recommended improvements that would make them more efficient, and whereas an estimated cost for implementation and potential payback through energy savings was included, and whereas this work was done more than 2 years ago and has never come to council for evaluation and action, now therefore be it resolved that staff act on the recommendations in ASHRAE and report back to the next term of council regarding the implementation plan. To me, this is mind-boggling that we have had such a high-level energy audit for our buildings and nothing was done with it. And so I'm going to ask you, Mr. CAO, I know we've had change of staff, I know that it's busy. I'm going to ask you, Mr. CAO, to make sure that you have a look, please, at this energy audit. Make sure that the appropriate staff has a look at the energy audit. And perhaps you could come back with a follow-up before the end of this council term so we could know how this is going to move forward. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on this motion? You using your tablets then? Oh, Councillor Kim, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just reading that the ASHRAE report from 2015 and kind of vaguely remembered it and got the report, and it says that the town has implemented several retrofits and initiatives related to energy conservations, like town purchased the Bullfrog Eco-certified green power to offset power usage at Town Hall. Technology upgrades and energy management retrofits were completed at the AFLAC in Town Hall, and updated the HVAC unit at Town Hall to an energy efficient one. Installation of 17 idle-free zone signs at 6 town-owned facilities, and installation of 2 electric vehicle charging stations, and there's a whole list of energy improvement actions that says it took place in response to the report. So I was kind of puzzled as to Councillor Gardner's motion that the town did not act on it. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to who could best respond to that? Mr. Ramuno, can you reconcile those two pieces of information for us, please?
Mr. Ramuno.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I mean, I'll try. I did do a bit of research earlier today with respect to Councillor Gardner's motion, and Council hasn't seen it yet, but the Corporate Environmental Action Plan progress report was provided to the Environmental Advisory Committee just this June 14th, so those minutes haven't been forwarded to Council yet, but in that report it does identify a number of measures that have been implemented in response to that ASHRAE audit, and again, taking some of those suggestions from the Stantec reports and research that was done a couple of years ago. So they have been identified, and a number of those measures have been implemented, but we can certainly provide additional information to Council, because I don't believe Council has seen this 2017 progress report yet, because it was just sent to the EAC committee on June 14th.
So thank you, Mr. Ramuno. So then through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno, so I guess what I'm hearing is that many or perhaps even all of the recommendations have been implemented, and you're going to go back and just make sure that, you know, item by item, that they have been acted upon?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly, yeah, we'll definitely provide that information to Council. And I know I'm just looking at the progress report now. There are at least a dozen measures that have been implemented this past, or back in 2017. But what we can do moving forward is just identify for Council the number of suggestions that were listed in those earlier engineering reports from Stantec. But again, a number of those energy implementation or efficiency measures have been implemented in 2017, and moving forward, staff and facility staff are aware of those recommendations, and they're taking those under consideration whenever we bring any capital projects forward.
Great, thank you.
Councillor, you're welcome. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I guess through you to Mr. Ramuno, just for clarification, Mr. Ramuno, within the notes of motion it talks about that the report, I guess, has never come to Council for evaluation or discussion. Is that accurate?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure at this point. I still need to do a bit more research with respect to the original Stantec background work that was done. Staff have those recommendations. I'm just not sure at this point whether that was presented in some form to Council earlier on, but I'll certainly do that research and provide Council with that information.
Thank you. And you know, I tried to find reference to it in my own files and couldn't. And while you know, I support the concept, I'm a little leery of moving forward on recommendations that I don't know. What I did hear is that some of them have been incorporated into the Corporate Environmental Action Plan. I guess I would have liked to have seen as a first step just what those recommendations are, what we've accomplished to date, and what's left before deciding on whether or not to move forward with implementation. And so, while I support the concept, I have a hard time moving forward with recommendations that I don't know what they are.
Thank you. Any other speakers for the first time before I go back to Councillor Gardner? Councillor Gardner.
It's very interesting, Mr. Mayor, that we hired a consultant to do a comprehensive energy audit of the town buildings. It has never come to Council. Council never had the opportunity to decide what was most important to do or not important to do. We didn't prioritize it. We didn't look at the costs, the cost savings. So I agree with Councillor Thompson. I've missed the mark on this. But it's still extremely disturbing to me that this never came to council, and council didn't make the financial decisions on an energy plan that would make us more efficient and save us money. So I thank Councillor Kim for doing that extra work and reading it. And I would like to then change the now therefore. So now therefore be it hereby resolved that staff report back to council on why this didn't come to council and give us a copy of the report. And we can probably do that this term. Do you want to send me back so that I have to come back with this motion again? At the end of the day, the now therefore be it resolved needs to be something like a report come to council on why the ASHRAE report never came to council for council's consideration. And why is it that staff took it upon themselves to decide to do whatever they did decide to do from this audit? It's talking about process. That is not process. Process is coming.
I think it might be more appropriate to understand what the original direction was. And I'm sorry, I do not have that. But I think that staff could dig that up and drop us an email pretty quickly as to what the original
No,
direction
Mr. Mayor, I don't
was.
want an email. I want it to come back to council, please.
Well, but it would be handy, I think, for us to know what the issue was. It can certainly come back to council. That's the appropriate place to discuss it.
Certainly. I would look forward to that. And I don't think this kind of thing should be happening. Thank you.
Thank you. But I'm not sure what you want to do with this.
I would like to change the motion to that staff report back on why this didn't come to council for its consideration, and present the report for our consideration, or certainly for our information.
Is that contrary, Mr. Clerk?
I would appreciate help, yeah.
Mr. Clerk, could you speak a bit to that, please?
An update?
Just a
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Gardner, I wonder if a second clause and that the report contain an explanation as to why the energy audit report was never returned to council. Would that satisfy?
And also an update. We really should know what's being done from the energy audit.
Okay, so it would be, and that the report contain an update. I think I would think
an
that
update on what's been done to date.
Yeah, that would be part of what we would be doing anyways.
Okay.
But if we want, we can certainly add that the report contain an explanation as to why the audit was never returned to council.
Thank you.
If
that's okay with the rest of the people at this table.
We're changing the first clause. We're not adding a second clause. We're changing the first.
We're changing it completely.
Changing the first clause?
No, therefore be it hereby resolved that staff provide, and exactly what you said, an explanation of why it never came to council.
Councillor Perry?
The intent of a notice of motion is to let members of council as well as the public know what we are going to be voting on. Councillor Gardner, I'll be honest, I agree with the report, but I think it would just make more sense to withdraw this, and then in the July meeting, if not before, to have staff give us some information. But I think it makes more sense, and it'll run a lot more smoother, and it'll make sure that we capture everything we're looking to capture.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the suggestion of Councillor Peary, I think it's a good idea. I'll withdraw this motion and bring it back with a different now therefore.
Okay, I'll ask the second. Councillor Abel? All right, thank you. That motion is withdrawn then. Councillor Gardner, the next motion is yours.
Thanks.
Councillor Gartner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is quite a
Are you moving it?
I'm moving it, please.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys is seconding it. I'm going to go to the clerk first because we did have a discussion on this because we have discussed this previously. Mr. Clerk?
Yes, we did.
Through Mr. Mayor, first of all, to Councillor Peary to correct me if I'm wrong with any of the information here. My understanding is that this went to Environmental Committee. The Environmental Committee recommended to Council that an anti-idling bylaw be crafted. That recommendation did not go to Council as staff had some big concerns with how we would enforce. So I believe it went back to the committee who said, who may have agreed that the enforcement would be difficult and asked that the mayor sign some letters to various agencies about anti-idling. So there's no direction on the books for staff about anything anti-idling. This motion would not be reconsideration or contrary or anything like that.
Thank you. Councillor Gartner?
Thank you. I'm not sure I followed completely, but I was at that meeting where the Corporate Energy Environmental Action Plan was discussed, and they were not in favor of an anti-idling bylaw. Is that what you just said?
Mr. Clerk?
Oh, you were at that meeting too?
Just one person, please.
My understanding is that originally the committee was, but then once they heard that staff had enforcement concerns about an anti-idling bylaw, they just asked that staff prepare letters for the mayor to sign to various agencies regarding anti-idling.
Thank you. This motion is not asking for an anti-idling bylaw because I also had conversations with staff and it's very, very hard to enforce. So at least as a starting point, perhaps a finishing point, I would like to have an anti-idling policy in place so that if somebody's idling their car, you can go up and you can say, excuse me, do you know that we have a policy in place? You know, these things, maybe they're small and they're individual, but they can become pretty big when we're looking at environmental protection and climate change as a whole. So I think it would be fitting to have a policy. Now, we did have an education campaign at one point, but I don't think it was very effective. So maybe we could revisit that. And also, if I could suggest, we do have anti-idling signs, but they are about, I don't know, 10 feet above, no, that's not true. They're way above a driver's head. They're attached to the curb or the road, and they're not at eye level for a driver. So perhaps we could have some more appropriate signs put in place. But anyway, this is going back to staff for their ideas. So signage and public education and communications, and we do have a new communications person in place, and I believe she's, I'll embarrass her again, but a cut above the staff we had in place at the time we tried this last time.
Councillor Peary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, I think everybody knows that I care about the environment, but I think there is a very difficult practical hurdle to overcome with regards to anti-idling, and I'm happy to try other things, but I envision a situation where somebody like me would walk up, you know, to an idling car. Excuse me, I think there's a policy in place that prevents you from doing this. You know, it might not end well for me. It might, you know. I could be told a number of expletives, you know, and the situation doesn't get resolved. It's a step in the right direction. I understand that there are massive problems with the enforcement. You know, you call, somebody drives off before any bylaw officers show up. But there are some real concerns with GO trains is one example where trains were idling in the past to ensure that the either the air conditioning or the heating stayed on within those. And would you rather have people, you know, in a hot cabin, or would you rather have them anti-idling or not idling? Are there other systems that can be inserted? Happy to vote in favor of this, but I do think there are some just practical, realistic concerns that even if we do this, we again might not have the intended outcomes that Councillor Gartner is looking for, but that's not, a reason not to try. So.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I can support a policy which just looks at best practices, includes a public education campaign whereby the town says, listen, we want to kind of reduce the amount of idling that's happening, and here are some of the things we can do. I agree that enforcement is a very difficult thing, and so I'm okay with the motion as stands. I would just ask for one thing, and that the title of the motion be amended so it doesn't say anti-idling bylaw but says anti-idling policy, because I think the bylaw is a completely different connotation to the policy. If our policy is that we're going to do public education, do ways to reduce the amount of idling that happens in town, great, that's a nice step forward and stuff, but that's a completely different connotation than the creation of a bylaw and having our bylaw officers enforce it. So with the okay of Councillor Gardner, I would just ask that it be retitled anti-idling policy.
Councillor Gardner?
Absolutely.
Okay. And that would be an administrative change, Mr. Clerk?
Through Mr. Mayor, absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Thompson, for pointing that out. We went back and forth and did not change bylaw to policy, so it's my mistake.
No worries.
Should we, along that line, just pointed out by the CAO, remove the reference to an enforcement mechanism then? Okay. All right. Just asking the question. All right. So if there's no other further comments or questions on this, if everybody would please use their tablets for voting. And that passes 7-1. Thank you. That finishes the motions. There is no regional report. Under new business, Councillor Perry, may I start with you, please? None. Councillor Kim, anything under new business?
Just a couple of quick questions. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Downey. Sorry. Just wanted you to have be prepared. So in Thomas Coates Park, where I've been going to, 3 times a week to play tennis, there's always people waiting. There are only 2 tennis courts, and there's always some fuss about getting on and how long they've been there and whose turn it is. Is it possible to have just like those little wooden things where you can just put your tennis rackets so that people know who's first, second, third? Is that a costly item that can't be added?
Mr. Downey.
You, Mr. Mayor, we can either do a racket or we can do the ball, whichever you prefer.
Racket.
You rather do the racket?
Sure.
Okay.
And
some people might think that is a racket, Councillor.
Okay, yeah. And the last question to Ms. Van Leeuwen. Yeah, the bylaw number, when you dial it after hours or on weekends, it goes into a voicemail, but I do know that bylaw officers are on duty on the weekends. So do they check their voicemail on the weekends and respond back as best they could?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have an after-hours call service, so if you phone in our general line and there's a phone tree and you are prompted to press a number depending on what it is, it goes to the call center. The call center has our bylaw officers' schedule and they have their mobile phones and they will call the primary or secondary depending if we have 1 or 2 officers on duty. If there's no one on duty and it's an emergency, they are advised to call 911. And for non-emergency situations, they take in the information and we get a report the following day or on Monday morning.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because when I called, it was went directly to a voice message. But okay. So, For noise violations, is it always best for bylaw to deal with that, or is it usually the police?
Ms. Fenlon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if we have an officer on duty, we will attend. The police have the authority to enforce our noise bylaw as well, but it also depends on what other priorities that they're dealing with.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Tom? Councillor Humphreys, new business.
Mr. Mayor, just a quick question, and if it can't be answered tonight, that's fine. It's me again with that house on Elmwood, the Heritage Home on Elmwood and Kennedy. It's getting further and further into despair, and I know that they had applied for a community improvement grant.
Kennedy and Young?
I'm sorry, Kennedy and Young, sorry. It was the old Elmwood Brides building, and it's really worrying me. I just wondered if we know anything about that. If you don't now, don't worry about it. I can follow up. Okay, thanks.
Mr. Ramuno, if you'd follow up on that then. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Through you to Ms. Desario, since she hasn't answered any questions tonight. Last term, one of the things that was provided to us was just an update on where all the legal proceedings stand prior to the end of term. Is there a plan to do that? And if so, when?
Ms. Desario.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there is a plan to do it, and it will be for next cycle. It will likely, they'll go out as an information report in a closed session format.
That's fine. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
By the way, how was your vacation? Was it good?
Councillor Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First thing, could we have a copy of the ASHRAE report circulated to all members of council? Thank you. Okay. Mr. CAO, you and I have had conversations back and forth about the Committee of Adjustment and Minor Variances, and that the region is now going to say, oh dear, they're no longer going to say no objection when it's not their place to comment. They're going to say no comment, because what was would you like to explain it?
Not really. I don't think we can ask Mr. Nader Rossi to explain the region's processes.
So, no, well, what was happening is that if, let's say, the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority was the commenting agency on behalf of the region about an environmental issue, the region would send to us a no objection. But actually, they had no comment because it wasn't in their jurisdiction. So I believe the region has agreed to do that.
Mr. Nader Rossi?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I've been told that planning is fine with saying no comment as opposed to no objection. Just to be clear, though, I didn't necessarily test this on a jurisdictional basis. It was more so there could be some things where they might be in a legitimate position to comment.
Yeah, perfect.
Just to be clear.
So could we have something in writing to that effect? Just to have it on record?
From whom?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I've sort of done this informally, but I did receive an email from the head of planning at the region that they have no objection to changing it, so I expect it to just become practice.
Well, we could have that expectation, but I'd rather have it official, if you wouldn't mind.
I can ask. You can ask.
You can ask, and also so that would be confirmed. We can confirm that the staff reports are going to reflect that to the C of A, that the region is going to, when it doesn't have jurisdiction, is going to have no comment.
Mr. CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, I didn't get into a conversation about jurisdiction whatsoever. I simply asked that they would consider, rather than no objection, changing their terminology to no comment, and that's what they agreed to do. So I'd have to explore further about the jurisdictional issue if...
well, as you know, Mr. Mayor, this came about as a notice of motion that I was going to put in. So maybe I need to do the notice of motion so it becomes official. We can talk about that later. Thank you. Can somebody tell me how we're going to proceed with trying to figure out the need for baseball diamonds? Do we have a plan in place? We were talking about resizing fields and doing other things. Of course, baseball is very concerned about this. Ms. McDougall, do we have actually a plan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Right now, the staff certainly are trying to pool our resources, certainly with speaking to Mr. Downey as well about the assets we have and what space mapping can be done. So the goal will be to consult with the user groups, possibly bringing in the ball groups to a session and then potentially the soccer groups, because in fairness, we need to have a long-range plan for both. As far as timing goes of when that would take place, knowing this is their season, it could be challenging over the summer, but certainly something we can work towards. If not, then I could see a fall wrap-up meeting that could work towards both of those groups participating in some type of a consultation about some repurposing, as once we even have our notes together, as well as their goals and interests of projections of their need. So it's a high-level plan. It's not in stone at this point.
Well, and thank you. I didn't vote for 2 baseball diamonds, although I do know there is a need, and I think we need to find a way to at least further research exploring the need and how we can accommodate it. Thank you. Last thing, all of council have received emails about 2 issues. One is construction noise coming in a construction area that is directly attached to a residential zone. This had to do with loud playing of the radio during the day. Is this twigging on anyone? So, you know, I understand the residents' concern. So I have spoken to Ms. Van Leeuwen, but I think we need to take it seriously because we're going to be having a lot of infill development. So this is going to be happening, one would think, quite a lot. So I would like council, staff and council to address this. And the other is the issue about putting a gate into a fence backing on a park. And I would also like to say that council try and form a policy where a gate can be put in a fence under certain circumstances. And Ms. Van Leeuwen tells me that I'm looking for trouble. But you know, we have a resident who needs our help. And it seems to me we could form a policy about when to put gates in fences and when not to. We have to have.
I'll give that. I asked Mr. Nader-Ross.
I know it's complicated too.
See, Mr. Mayor, we actually had a discussion about this today. We will bring forward a report, but it is quite a complicated effort in that the fences in question are on municipal property. They're municipal fences, as opposed to fences that are on private property, where there's a difference. And so you can imagine the complexities of allowing a homeowner to modify a town property, you know, and getting that done appropriately without creating a liability to the town and so on. But we did have a lengthy conversation about today, and we will be bringing a report to council in the future.
And I thank you so very much for doing that.
Councillor Marcus.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Downey or Ms. McDougall, I'm not sure which one. I think it's Mr. Downey because this is operational probably. A baseball diamond at Machel continuously has a pool of water along the third baseline. And I'm just wondering if we can make sure that we get out there and take care of that. It's been happening week after week. It's 2 days was the last rainfall, and there's still a big, huge pool of water there, which is kind of making the ball diamond unusable. Thank you, Mr. Downey. And then I guess this is also through you, Mr. Chair, about Thomas Coates Park as well. Is there a reason that we have the basketball nets at the height that they're at? From my understanding, we don't have any NBA players out there, so I'm just wondering why the height is so high.
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is they're at regulation height. Are you suggesting maybe less than regulation?
Well, my thought is, considering we don't have any NBA players running around, and this is more for either children or seniors that don't necessarily can jump and dunk on a 10-foot rim, I would, are they able to be moved? Are they movable, or are they just stuck at the 10 feet height?
Through Mr. Mayor, I can take a look at it. They're normally installed at regulation height, so whether or not we can modify that is something I can look into.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Councillor Gartner's question triggered something. At the start of this year, Councillor Marcus brought forward a motion with regards to the establishment of a local appeals body, and then you took it up to the region. Has there been any conversation, any movement?
There's been conversation, but there's no. They're still working through some of the details, and there's been a hiccup, of course, with the change of government.
Thank you.
Councillor Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You don't need to make up for the other people who didn't ask. I just let you know.
But I just realized this is our last meeting till...
No, July.
July, I know. And then... No, but it's... This is our last council meeting for a while. And then we have nothing in August. And then in September, people start to drain their pools and hot tubs. So I'd like to ask you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Muno, or anybody you can answer, the motion that went forward to staff for report, where is it at?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, on the pool, discharge of pool water, we are working on that report, and we're trying to get it in front of council, hopefully for the July cycle.
Thank you, that would be great.
PSAs, Councillor Maracas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to recognize, now that we're considered near the end of the term, there's a few committees that have ceased to now. They've done their work for the term, and they're done. So, Environmental Advisory Committee, Trails, Parks and Rec. And I think there might be a few others, but there's some that are going to continue on till the end of the term. I just want to recognize those citizens that have put their names forward and have volunteered to put in the time to help make our community a better place. And I think we all appreciate it. I think the residents appreciate it, the town as a whole appreciates it. So I just wanted to once again thank them for all their service that they've done for the community.
Thank you. Councillor Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I happen to be sitting on a committee and a board that continue. So it is wonderful that we have citizens who will come out and, really do their best to put forward information that advises council. And I thank Councillor Maracas for reminding us all of that.
Councillor Thompson. Councillor Humphreys.
This time I don't. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, just a reminder that the Aurora Farmers Market every Saturday from 8 in the morning till 1 in the afternoon. Strawberry Fest was last weekend. I heard it was fantastic. I was out of town most of the weekend. I missed it, but it continues to be a great event, and really something special is Wednesday starting at concerts in the park, July 4th. Farmers market vendors will be there as well on Wednesday night, so it's really exciting. Thanks to town staff to organize that with the farmers market. It's going to be fantastic, so you'll get to enjoy great music in the park and the farmers market, fresh produce, and a great night. So just wanted to remind everyone of that.
Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to wish all Aurorans a very happy Canada Day coming up, and hope that they will be celebrating with their families and friends our great Dominion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of items. One item is our library CEO, Jill Foster, is retiring in a couple of weeks, and so just wanted to thank her for her, I think it's almost 5 years of service in the Aurora Public Library. So just want to recognize her. And lastly, I think Councillor Abel mentioned it earlier today about, it's called Gospel in the Park tomorrow, or so that's at Town Park tomorrow at 7. So hopefully public planning meeting will not be too long, and we'll be able to enjoy the music tomorrow. Thank you.
Councillor Perry.
We'll be praying.
This is public service announcements, not wishful thinking.
In the nature of just in being conscious of time, Rotary Dance is taking place in Town Park on Saturday from 6 to 11 p.m. Canada Day Parade is taking place at 10 a.m. And we have a full dearth of different activities that are happening on Canada Day at Lambert Wilson Park.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Gartner.
I would just like to say that James Hoyes is the headliner on Saturday night.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick ones. Registrations are open for summer programs and summer camps. Aurora.ca/rec guide. June is Recreation and Parks Month. Aurora.ca/Recreation Parks Month. Town Hall is closed on the 2nd, open for business on the 3rd. And recruitment for the 2018-2019 Youth Engagement Committee is now open. It's open to Aurora teens aged 12 to 17, and you can visit aurora.ca/youth. And I encourage you to do that. That being the business for this evening, may I please have the bylaws, please? Councillor Thompson, thank you. Second, Councillor Perry, using your tablets, please. That passes. May I please have the confirming bylaw? Councillor Kim, Councillor Tom. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Thompson. All in favor? Opposed? Adjourned. Thank you, staff.